Good afternoon. I'm Margaret Buscalia. I'm the Executive Director of the Alaska State Commission for Human Rights, and I would like to welcome you to our listening session. This is our first ever listening session, and we'll have many more in the future, so thanks for joining us today. I wanted to introduce some of the people that make the commission work, starting with our chairman, Brandon Nakasato. Chairperson Nakasato, if you could say hello to the camera, that would be most helpful. This is our chairperson. And then we also have with us today, Yolan, who is another one of our commissioners. And he is coming up to say hello as well. And I believe joining us in Fairbanks is Commissioner Catherine Dodge, who is also a member of our commission. I'm very grateful to have you watching this session because we think it's really important for you to know what it is we do. So we're going to do a brief presentation on what the Alaska State Commission for Human Rights, what rights of yours it protects. And we want you to be more familiar with some changes that we're also making to our the Alaska Administrative Code. So we're adding some regulations, including a service animal regulation. And we have that up right now as on our website, humanrights.alaska.gov, and on the Anchorage website, the public notice section. So if you're interested in what our regulation changes entail, please take a look at those. We are right now in the public comment period, and we will be so through November 28th. So we welcome your comments. They will come in emails to me, and I will address them on the website. So we appreciate any comments that you send our way. I'm now going to pass it on to Chairperson Nakasato to say a few words of welcome.
Thank you. Again, my name is Brandon Nakasato. I'm the person of the Commission for Human Rights. I guess the first thing I want to say is that it is an honor to serve elections as the chairperson and previously as the Commissioner for the Human Rights Commission. It is a mission that I know many people believe in and see the need for. And so I wanted to say over the past 5 decades, pretty much since Alaska has its close to statehood, the State Commission for Human Rights has developed as a pioneer in civil rights enforcement, and through its efforts to protect Alaskans, it contributes to a healthy society. And so I wanted to say, as the people who the staff talk about recent changes, it demonstrates that the Commission is listening to you in the needs, and that's the purpose of this listening session, is to show that the Commission is not only an enforcement agency, but it's an education agency. It's an agency that responds to developing needs in the community. And so, to be brief, which is rare for me, I will say thank you for watching and remind you that the State Commission for Human Rights is a resource for you. And so it's really important that if you see a need, you communicate that need and you participate in resolving it.
Thank you, Chairperson Nakasato. And I believe our Commissioner Freddie Owen wanted to say a few words as well. So we'll ask Commissioner Owen to step up.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks for having me this afternoon. I haven't really said this on the record during our meetings, but just seeing the racism complaints on a quarterly basis is high. I think over 80 every quarter. So as an Alaska person, it really stirs my passions for justice, and the reason why I stepped up to be a commissioner.
Thank you. Okay, and now I'd like to introduce Commission staff that is here. Staff, please step up. I appreciate that. We have with us our Chief of Enforcement, Sarah Lupton. She's also one of the lead lawyers of the Commission. We have our attorney mediator, Ritzy Bolaños, who is also our outreach person, and she's the one that put this together. So thank you for that, Ritzy. And we have Matt Chandrasina, who is our Director of Investigations, one of two of our directors at the Commission. And then we'll all pass it off to Betsy, who will start with the presentation.
Thank you, Marty. And thank you everyone for being here, for watching this across the state. We will be brief, and we just an overview of what the Commission, who we are, what we do, and briefly some of the types of cases that we see most often. And so to begin, we are the state agency that enforces Alaska's human rights law. We have 7 commissioners appointed by the governor, some of whom you've heard from already this morning, and we are very grateful for their service. They are volunteers, and we appreciate them very much. We do have a staff in Anchorage. However, we do have statewide power, so even though our office and our staff is in Anchorage, we do take complaints from across the state. Our mission is to eliminate and prevent discrimination for all Alaskans, and our vision is an Alaska free of discrimination. And this is how we work to eliminate and prevent discrimination. So we accept complaints of discrimination, of violations of the human rights law, and then we investigate those complaints. And we are fair and impartial. A lot of times a complainant might think that we are representing them, but that's not what we do. We do investigate each complaint impartially. And we attempt early resolutions of complaints. So for instance, I'm a mediator, and so we do try to get the parties together, have a conversation, figure out what's going on, and figure out how we can move forward, quickly, efficiently, in a way that is fair for all sides. We will dismiss complaints and substantial evidence for the allegations, or if we don't find violation of the human rights law. And then if we do find a violation of the human rights law, again, we will try to resolve it through conciliation. So again, getting the parties together to negotiate, figuring out a way that we can all move forward in a fair way without having to proceed through more formal channels. But if we have to proceed, we will, and we will present cases at public hearing. And so our complaints will be confidential up until we get to that point, if we get to that point of presenting at public hearing. So that summarizes our eliminating discrimination goal. And now when it gets to prevention, some of the things we do is we give technical advice on the human rights law. So for instance, we might have someone call us and say, I'm being evicted and I think it's because of my service animal. What do I do? What are my rights? And so we would give legal information to that person without advising to try to help them figure out their next course of action. But at the same time, we might get a phone call from an employer saying, we're having this situation, or I have an employee who's a nursing mother. What are my responsibilities? Do I have to give that person extra times? What do I need to do there? Employers who want to be in compliance with the law just need a little bit of that information there too. And then lastly, we'll conduct workshops and trainings for employers and businesses and landlords and really any organization or group of individuals who want to comply with the human rights law, might just not know exactly all the details of it. That works especially well with small businesses who might not have a big HR department or a big legal department, and they want to do the right thing, they're just not quite sure how to navigate it. So this is a flow chart of what it looks like when a complaint comes in the door. We can spend a long time on each little box, but we'll just look at it pretty briefly here. We'll have an intake or an inquiry, and it's important for people to know that you can walk into our office to file a complaint or to speak with an investigator. You can give us a call, and now you can also submit an inquiry online at humanrights.alaska.gov. If we find that we do have jurisdiction over the facts that you shared with us, and it is covered by our Alaska human rights law, then we will write up a complaint. And then again, at that point, it can go to mediation, right away, or it can go to an impartial, confidential investigation. And like I said before, after an investigation, if there is not substantial evidence, go ahead and dismiss that and close that. But if there is, again, we try to resolve it through our conciliation process. And if that doesn't work, then we will go to a public hearing, or we have discretion to go to a public hearing. And so this is the Alaska Human Rights Statute. It's Alaska Statute 18. And in Alaska, it's illegal to discriminate in employment, public accommodation, sale or rental of real property, financing and credit, and practices by the state or its political subdivisions. On the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, physical or mental disability, and also in certain circumstances because of age, marital status, changes in marital status, pregnancy, or parenthood. And so this is one type of discrimination that we see very often, unfortunately. But it's a type of complaint that we get regularly, and with disparate treatment, really all that means is that someone is being treated differently than others in their similar positions, in their similar situations. And they're being treated differently because of a protected trait. And what I mean by that is because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, age, marital status, pregnancy, and parenthood. And so some examples of that might be a female employee in the same job, in the same situation, who is being paid less than a male employee. Another example might be an employer who receives several job applications and only runs background checks on people with a certain last name, or people of a certain race, if they know the race. So lots of different things that can play a part here, but it's really just being treated differently. That's the heart of discrimination, and that's the heart of what we're trying to eliminate and prevent. And then if the employer can show that they had some other legitimate reason for their act, then that would be a defense, and that's something that we would analyze and look at in our investigation. And then the second type of discrimination that we see fairly often is harassment. And sexual harassment has been in the news lately, but there are a lot of other types of harassment. It's not just sexual harassment. And so harassment is unwelcome conduct based on a protected class. And there is a balancing act on when it is illegal, and we'll talk about that in a second. But some examples of harassment, so for example, not sexual harassment, but let's say someone who is from another country who has English as a second language, and people are making fun of their accents or manners of speech, making inappropriate jokes, stereotypical commentary, slurs, sexual innuendo jokes, stories, so now we're getting more into the sexual harassment. But it can also be nonverbal, so staring, walking the path, suggestive gestures, photos, cartoons, showing someone inappropriate photos, inappropriate cartoons, blowing kisses, standing too close. So you can see just this unwelcome conduct, this uncomfortable conduct. And it can rise to the level of harassment. And I think it's important to note that harassment doesn't have to be by a supervisor or a boss. Harassment can be by a coworker and even by a third party who doesn't even work there. So for instance, customers and clients. An employer does have a responsibility to make a workplace free of harassment. And so that includes supervisors, coworkers, and third parties as well. Nothing tangible about the individual's job has to be affected, and so what that means is that, you can suffer from harassment without being fired or demoted or, have that type of adverse action connected to your employment. It doesn't take away from the fact that, you can still be suffering from harassment. And the key issues are frequency and severity, and by that we just mean harassment can be one, really incident, or it can be very simple, and it can just add up over time. And then lastly, I think retaliation is always something important to discuss, because so many times we have complainants who will say, I'm afraid I might lose my job if I complain. I need this job, I can't lose my job, or what if I get sent to this really awful work site that nobody wants because I complain. And so it's important to realize that taking an adverse action against a person for opposing discrimination, which can include filing a complaint with us, or even just cooperating in an investigation, so even just being a witness, is also illegal under the human rights law. And some examples of adverse actions are termination, increased load, withholding or denying benefits, a negative job reference, which can be really harmful as you move forward, and undesirable assignments. Those are just some examples, but any negative treatment that you receive because you filed a complaint or because you complained of discrimination internally, or even because you participated in an investigation is retaliation and could be grounds for a complaint with us as well. And so we're going to move forward now into our proposed 2018 regulations. These are up on our website. You can get the full text of them up on our website. The comment period, as Marty Buscalia mentioned earlier today, is still open. And so I just wanted to hit on a couple key points for our regulation update. So the first one is that we have changed who may file a complaint to persons rather than individuals. And that is because persons is defined as an organization or a company. And so now, instead of just an individual who can file a complaint, an organization can file a complaint on behalf of its constituents. Another important difference is that right now, complainants have 180 days from the time of the harm to file a complaint with us, but we're going to extend that now to 300 days. At least that is our proposal. So we have proposed 300 days now to file a complaint instead of 180. Another important change would be that conciliation records will be kept completely confidential and not be disclosed. And finally, our executive director, Marty Buscalia, would be able to reopen a case for reconsideration within 30 days. And what that means is that if we close a case, let's say we could not find substantial evidence for these allegations, and we close a case, but the complainant gives us a call and says, I think you should be this. Or if Marty on her own wants to reconsider that, she can, and the file can be reopened within 30 days. And then a very important proposed change is a service animal regulation. So right now, in our human rights law, we don't have a definition for service animal, and that can get pretty confusing. We do follow the federal definition and the federal guidelines, but we want to have our own. And we think it is the right time, and this is the right place in the Alaska Human Rights Law to have this definition. So right now, in the proposed regulation update, service animal will be defined as a dog or miniature horse that is trained for an individual with a disability. And that is the federal definition. So that is right in line with the federal definition. Except we have chosen to go one step further and also include any animal that alerts a person with a disability to the present impairment of a vital function, which is a condition of the individual's disability, and whose ability to alert is verified in writing by a licensed healthcare provider who's conducted a physical examination of the individual in person. That's a lot of words, but what that means is that any animal, so not limited to a dog or miniature horse, who can alert a person to something going wrong with the vital function. And by vital function, we mean a function that is vital to your life. So for instance, respiratory condition or blood circulation. And whose ability to alert is verified in writing. So not to be confused with the first definition of animal, you do not need any sort of registration, certification, anything like that. But when we're talking about this separate definition of any animal that alerts, then we are going to require some kind of verification in writing. And just a couple other points on the service animal regulation. Most of this is pretty in line with the federal guidelines, and I'll note which ones aren't. But emotional support animals are not service animals, and that is standard with the federal guidelines as well. No certification or registration is required, except that, as I just mentioned, for alert animals, you may have to produce written verification. So an individual with a disability shall be permitted to be accompanied by his or her service animal in all areas of a public accommodation. That is the federal standard as well, and we just want to make sure that that's in our regulations, even though that's what we have been following so far. And that also applies to state services, and it also applies to the sale, lease, rental, or use of real property. Concerning real property, we do want to make clear that nothing that we have proposed in our regulations will infringe on your rights or responsibilities under the Federal Fair Housing Act. And we do have some materials here today that discuss the difference between an assistance animal in housing and a service animal. And those are also available at our office. And then lastly, a service animal in training will receive the same protections. This is not true under the federal guidelines, but again, we have expanded the service animal definition to include greater protections for individuals with disabilities in our state. And so at this time, we'd love to hear from the community. We want to know, what is it that we're not seeing that you are seeing or that you are experiencing? And so, we are available by phone, by email. We'd love to hear from you. And these are just some of the questions. If you have something to share with us, we would definitely love to hear from you. These are some additional questions, and I can actually read those out loud. What is your experience with discrimination? What was your response to this experience? And do you think there are sufficient resources available to prevent or correct discrimination? Again, we want to know how we can do better. And that's what we're trying to get at with these questions. Do you feel included in the community? And do you think Alaska is a welcoming place? We'd love to hear from you again. You can give us a call in our office, send us emails. You can walk in also. And that is all I have for today. If there's any questions from the audience at this point, I'd love to answer them. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this. We appreciate it, and we do hope to hear from you. Anything from the audience? Great. So I think we will wrap up. Thank you again.